Craiova city has the privilege of having one of the largest and most beautiful parks in Europe. The Nicolae Romanescu Park, called after the person who initiated it, is one of the best-known and looked-after places of recreation in the whole region. It is the third largest park in Europe, being one of the favorite places of relaxation for the inhabitants of Craiova, and not only, as almost all the tourists passing through the city or region go to visit it, and are fascinated by its beauty, returning whenever they have another opportunity. The park had more names over time, such as the Bibescu Park, the Independence Park, or the People's Park. In mid-19th century, the estate and garden of Boyar Bibescu's family stretched on the place of the present-day park. Initially, this garden was quite remarkable for the time, arranged by a German gardener brought especially for that by the Bibescus. There were placed pavilions, benches, and a few greenhouses here. After 1848, due to the financial problems of the family, the place was in an advanced state of decay, so that in 1853 the ground was bought by the City Hall of Craiova, at the wish of the ruler of the time, Babu Știrbei, who wanted to change this place into a public garden for the benefit of the inhabitants of the town. The domestic political events made Babu Știrbei's wish impossible to carry out at the moment, so that, at the end of the 20th century, after less than 50 years from the purchase, the garden had become one of the unhealthiest places of the town. Weeds had spread everywhere, the lake was a pest hole, and there had been built the City Hall stables on one side of the garden. The summer residence of the Bibescus, a wonderful manor, had been changed into an asylum for the elderly. The destiny of the park was to change in 1898, when Nicolae Romanescu was elected mayor of the town. An innovating spirit, wishing to modernize and give the town a European image, he carried into effect an ample project of setting up parks and public gardens. The first option was the ground bought from the family of Bibescu. In order to materialize his ideas, Nicolae Romanescu chose Édouard Redon, a famous French landscape architect. The project of the park started in 1900, based on the exceptional designs of the French architect, whose vision succeeded to create this landscape jewel, the work being rewarded the gold medal at the International Exhibition of Paris in 1900. To carry out the works, another Frenchman was assigned, architect Émile Pinard, who started work immediately using 3 teams of 30 workers each. Arranging the park included adjoining constructions, a greenhouse, a nursery, creating alleys, installing public illumination, ample works of draining, and especially planting trees and flowers. The workload was enormous compared to the technical possibilities back then. 500,000 cubic meters of land were removed, while the length of the alleys exceeded 26 kilometers. There were planted over 1,150,000 trees, of all species, that is, native softwood and hardwood, but also rare species brought from Europe, and some even from Himalaya. At the same time, the rest of the dry land, where there weren't planted trees, was covered with turf brought from France and Italy. The lighting mains were made by the Electrical Society of Berlin. The official inauguration of the park took place on September the 29th, 1903, in the presence of King Carol I, though minor works continued until 1904. Over time, there were carried out many other works to embellish the park. In 1943, as a homage brought to the man who made possible the attainment of this park, a bust of Nicolae Romanescu was erected at the main entrance. Between 1954 and 1956, the existing gateway was built. The place was enclosed by a fence with poles. The wharf was rebuilt and enlarged, and in 1964 the public lighting was modernized, and a greenhouse of 1,000 square meters was raised. At present, the park has 96 hectares of green space, a central lake of over 4 hectares, and alleys of about 35 kilometers long. The Romanescu Park was made to figuratively have all the forms of relief. Starting from the main entrance and strolling on the alleys of the park, you notice the plain at first, then the green hills and the river flowing slowly through the middle of the park. Going up the river, strewn with mini waterfalls, you reach the lake. The nice wharf on the lake shore is endowed with boats and hydrobikes. In the background, quite far, you can see the suspended bridge. There are 2 hills on the left and right, so this is the hilly region. The view is wonderful here, where you can better see the park in all its splendor. Then the way passes necessarily over the suspended bridge round the enchanted castle. The mountainous region starts here. The creek under the bridge flows between 2 woody slopes, being crossed from time to time by stone bridges. The enchanted castle is a fascinating and romantic construction, which was imagined by Redon's ingenious mind as a cover for the large water basins that were initially used for the irrigation of the park. This genius conceived it as a ruin so that it could unleash the posse's imaginations and the lover's whispers. The Nicolae Romanescu Park hosts one of the oldest zoos in Romania, inaugurated in 1906. The collection of animals was at first formed only of some local species, such as the Carpathian bear or deer. In the 60s, the zoo was populated with lions, monkeys and ostriches, and later there were brought llamas, jaguars and even tigers. There are many works of art, mainly sculptures, made by Romanian artists placed throughout the park. The former residence of the Bibescus became the premises of the plastic artists who helped with their works to the beautifying of the park. At the same time, the park has a velodrome of Olympic dimensions, where youngsters and grown-ups meet daily for a ride on the bicycle or rollerblades. And also a hippodrome, inaugurated in 1903, stretching over 20 hectares and being the largest in the country at the beginning of the century. Impressive in size, charming in its composition of natural elements that define it, the Romanescu Park represents an exceptional monument of landscape architecture, unique in Romania, conceived and achieved as a romantic and stimulating place, which we enjoy at the moment, and have to preserve and offer it to the future generations. The content of this material does not necessarily represent the official position of the European Union.